Hello everybody and welcome to Module 15, Lesson 2, Volume of Rectangular Prisms. Our essential question for today is how do you find volume of a rectangular prism? And we have another formula that we are going to be using for finding volume of a rectangular prism. So write this down, this is super important. Our formula is volume equals length times width times height. Okay, please copy this down into your notes. This formula is super important. We are going to be talking about it as we discuss volume of rectangular prisms. So volume equals length times width times height. So everything is multiplication when finding volume of a rectangular prism. Okay, we're going to start with this prism. So we have three values given here, 7.89 feet. We have another value, 4.10 feet, and our last value, 10.25 feet. Well, we have the length of our first side is 7.89, so I'm going to label that length. And that's represented by a cursive L. Next we have width. So width is kind of like how fat it is. So we're going to take this side and this is going to be our width. The thickness is another way to think of that. Width is represented with the letter W. And last I have height. Height is how tall my shape is. My shape is 10.25 feet tall. And height is represented with an H or a cursive H. Now every time I solve a problem using a formula, the first thing that I always do is write my formula down so I know what I am following, what numbers I need to substitute in. So V for volume equals L times W times H. So now I'm just substituting in V equals 7.89, that's my length, times, and I'm using a dot for multiplication, we're not using any X's, times my width, W, which was 4.10, times my height, which was 10.25. This is all being measured in feet. So now I'm going to calculate these three. So I'm going to start with just my first two numbers. So I'm multiplying 7.89 times 4.10, and I get 32.349. I'm going to eliminate the 9, just go 2 places past the decimal. So I'm going to say 32.34, and you should be checking this on your calculator with me as we're doing this together. And I'm going to bring down my multiplication symbol and times that by 10.25, and that's going to tell me what my volume is. So take your 32.34 and go ahead and multiply it by 10.25 to find your volume. The volume is 331.48. Now thinking back to when we did area and surface area in 15.1 and back in Module 13 when we were doing some area, we always squared our answer. We put a little exponent 2, or we said like inches squared, something like that. Well, for volume, we always cube it. And so cube it means we put a little exponent 3. That means cubed, or we could use the word cubic. So I'm going to use the word cubic for this example. Cubic, and then my units, which were feet. So there we have it, 331.48 cubic feet. Another way that you could write that, you could say V equals 331.48 feet and then cubed, and you're showing your cubed with the exponent 3. So it's another way that you could do that. But really the math involved for finding volume here was pretty simple. We just did length times width times height. Let's look at another example, which were, oopsies. Okay, this is our second example. And again, we're using that same formula. So I'm writing it at the top, volume equals length times width times height. And again, I'm identifying which is my length, my width, and my height. and now I'm just multiplying those all together. If it's easier for you to convert these halves into decimals, you can make them 2.5 and 7.5. That's totally fine. Now let's go ahead and plug everything in. So I'm going to use 7.5, that's my length, times my width, which was solid 4, and which was my height, which was 2.5. Multiplying these all together is going to give my volume, so that's why I'm putting V equals each time. All right, I'm going to deal with 7.5 and 4 first. So first I'm going to calculate 7.5 times 4, and that's going to give me 30. So I'm keeping my V equals 30. Bring down your multiplication symbol and bring down your 2.5 or your 2.5. I'm converting with decimals to make it easier on my brain. Now I'm going to take my 30 and I'm going to multiply that by 2.5, which gives me 75. But it's not just 75. I need my units, and I need to cube it. When finding volume, we're always cubing. Another way that I could write this is 75 cubic inches. And that would be my final answer for the volume of this rectangular prism. So let's write down that note. We're always going to cube when finding volume. Okay, and you can show that by, like, I'm going to do x to the third power, or you can use the word cubic and then your units. Let's check out a word problem. Okay, here's our word problem. I know it's really tiny, so I'm going to read it to you. A fish tank is shaped like a rectangular prism. The prism is 5.37 centimeters wide, 8.25 centimeters long, and 6.2 centimeters high. Okay, well, high, we know height is going to be my h, wide, w is my width, and long. Long is the same thing as length, so that's going to be my L. So I'm going to take my V equals L for length times width times height. And now let's go ahead and substitute in those numbers. V equals 8.25 times width, which was 5.37, times 6.2. These are all measured in centimeters, and we're finding the volume. That's why I have my V equals each time here. Let's calculate our 8.25 times 5.37, and we're going to get 44.30. Now, I know there's some other numbers that come after that, but we're just going 2 decimal places past the whole number. So that's how I got my 44.30. Then we're going to bring down our multiplication sign and our 6.2. Okay, continuing on, multiplying that 44.30 times 6.2. And we should have gotten 247.66. And you could say cubic. And this time I'm dealing with centimeters, centimeters, centimeters. So I could say cubic centimeters. The other way I could write this is 274.66. Yes, I need to have, after my decimal point, my 66. That's part of my answer. cm cubed. So either way you say that would be the correct answer. So even though we had a word problem here, we were still able to deconstruct that word problem and put it into our formula. Let's try another word problem with a challenge attached to it. A wooden box measures 4.5 inches by 3.5 inches by 7 inches. What is the volume? Now in this problem, we are not given which one is the length, which one is the width, and which one is the height. And that is okay because we're dealing with multiplication. So anytime we're dealing with multiplication, we can do it in any order. And we remember that from our area and surface area chapter. So even though I'm using V equals length times width times height, it's multiplication. So really I could put these numbers in any order and I would still get the same answer. So I'm just going to write them in the order that they appear. Volume equals 4.5 plus times 3.5 times 7. Let's take care of that 4.5 times 3.5 first. and hopefully you got the same answer as me, 15.75. Then multiply that by 7, and we get a volume of 110.25 cubic, and this time we're using inches. So there's my answer for that. The volume is 110.25 cubic inches. Now our challenge here is to see if we could answer this question. What if you had 35 blocks? Then what would the volume be? Well, instead of doing this problem 35 times, there's a much easier method. I could just simply take my 110.25 and multiply it by 35. And that's going to give me the volume of 35 blocks. So go ahead and multiply that out. 110.25 times 35. What does it give you? Hopefully you got 3,858.75. But don't forget your cubic inches. That is part of the problem. So that's our final answer for that challenge. So any question that you get and it gives you another challenge like this one, what if you had 35 blocks? What if you had 100 blocks? All you have to do is use multiplication. It's that easy. All right, students, this has been Module 15.2, Volume of Rectangular Prisms.